Welcome to That Sailing Couple Podcast. I'm Tim.
I'm Lauren.
And today we're going to talk to you about dinghy rips and martini tips.
Yeah.
Two of a sailor's favorite things at sunset time.
If you're into martinis.
Or dinghies.
Which we didn't know we were. Well, we knew we were into dinghies. But we didn't know if we were into martinis. And turns out
I love them.
we are.
So you want to start with dinghy rips?
Let's start with dinghy rips.
Everybody smiles when they ride a dinghy. Dinghy is probably the most important sailboat accessory that you will ever buy because it's like your car. It's like it gets you from point A to point B. It helps you out when you're on anchor. It gets you to town. It gets your supplies. It is important.
Muy importante.
I think a lot of people, especially us, I mean, we're not even cruisers.
Nope.
But
we're weekend warriors, but we still need a dinghy.
We got one. And, you know, I got some recommendations on what to look for in a good dinghy. And I got some, I'm just going to fill y'all in on what my dreams are for my cruising dinghy.
Ultimate dinghy.
Yeah.
Well, let's get on with it.
All right. So you got a few choices to make when you're picking out a dinghy. You can obviously go inflatable or rigid, which is the big choice. If you decide inflatable, you've got PVC, you've got Hypalon. This may seem arbitrary as they're both like plastic, but...
Wait, PVC or what?
Hypalon.
Hypalon.
And Hypalon is a high-tech coated fabric that is very repairable.
Ours is PVC, right?
Ours is PVC.
Okay. What kind of dinghy did we get?
We got a second-hand Hydroforce dinghy that was sold by Costco. One of our big priorities on the dinghy was economics because we're not cruising right now. Mm-hmm. And I have some experience with raft repair. Like I'm a whitewater raft guide. Retired. So I've repaired PVC and Hypalon, and I felt comfortable with repairing whatever we bought, even though PVC is harder to repair than Hypalon. Hypalon's gonna last you longer. If you're buying like a rigid hold, like if you're taking the route of buying what's the brand that everyone gets?
Highfield.
If I was gonna get a Highfield dinghy, I would spend the extra $1,000 to get the Hypalon. If I was gonna get a rigid hold aluminum boat with rubber sides, I would definitely spring for the Hypalon because that floor is gonna last forever, and you want tubes that are gonna last as long as possible to go with that floor that you're spending that money on. If you're gonna buy like a solid aluminum floor or a solid fiberglass floor with PVC ribs, I just wouldn't do that. Our boat has an aluminum floor, which was the more economical option with the inflatable keel. And basically we bought secondhand, we bought something that would last long enough, and we bought the absolute biggest dinghy that our boat will carry, which I think is a very important thing in a cruising dinghy, is just buy the biggest one that you can hold. Buy the biggest dinghy you can fit on board because, like I said, it's your car. There's a lot of questions to ask yourself before you go and purchase a dinghy. Like, how will you use it? How far will you go? How fast do you need to get there? How much stuff do you need to carry? I think the ideal dinghy is 9 to 12 feet long with 4 to 15 horsepower. And I think that kind of size and power encompasses like pretty much any task that you need to accomplish. Obviously, if you're using it as a dive boat for 4 people, a 9-foot dinghy with a 4 horsepower is not going to cut it. And you probably want a 12-foot with 15, maybe more horsepower. If you have 2 people on your boat regularly getting groceries, then, a 10-foot boat with 6 horsepower, that's going to cover most people's needs. But I would say, we're Americans, And you know how Americans are.
Supersize me.
Supersize me. So I'm going to get the biggest dinghy that I can afford to carry. You know, I want the stability. I want everything, you know. We took a sunset cruise in our friend's dinghy the other night. Our dinghy's fine. It has 16-inch tubes. It's 10.5 feet long. It has a 4-horse motor with a hydrofoil, which I definitely get a hydrofoil because getting on plane quickly is invaluable. And our dinghy's perfect for us. Like, we can get on plane with our, 300 pounds of weight and probably a little bit more gear. We get on plane easily. We can rip around, see the sights, have our sundowners. That's what we use our dinghy for, at the moment. And I think that our dinghy, it will allow us to grow a little bit. I think that we bought a dinghy that will go on our next size vessel. Right now we're on a 26-foot weekend cruiser. We want to be on a 32-foot
Mexico cruiser.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we have a good dinghy to graduate to our next boat with, to where we won't have to replace it. If I was on a 50-foot cruising yacht, I might have 2 dinghies. I might have a small emergency dinghy that I can roll up and put in a locker somewhere, along with a 12-foot solid aluminum.
Somebody likes their dinghies.
I mean, dude, if you had a dinghy, it should rip.
Our buddy's dinghy definitely ripped a little bit harder than ours does.
Yeah, I mean, our friend Dustin at the marina, he uses his boat a little different than ours. He's got a live aboard, and it's his house. So it's a little harder for him to pack everything up and go do an hour-long sunset cruise. So his dinghy is to get around, you know what I mean? Like, it's 11.5 feet with a 20-horse two-stroke, and he can go outside the gate. We're not going that far. Like, we get outside the breakwater in our dinghy, and his dinghy is drier, more stable, and it doesn't sound much bigger. You think 10.5 feet versus 11.5 feet.
It's significantly bigger.
It's significantly bigger, and the main thing is that he can hold that 20-horse two-stroke no problem, where our boat is maxed out with a 6-horsepower 4-stroke, or maybe an 8-horsepower 2-stroke. My recommendations in buying a dinghy is, if you can fit it on board, get a rigid dinghy. If you can hold it on davits, if you can put it on a deck cradle, I think the rigid dinghy is the way to go. My favorite dinghies out there are Clark and Emily, have a 12-foot Lund aluminum with some built-in flotation. And I think they have a 15-horsepower 4-stroke on it. They have several videos talking about dinghies. They have a whole series. It's called Show Me Your Dinghy, which is kind of an inspiration to this podcast. Mm-hmm. And then my other favorite dinghy is Maggie on Delos is a 13-foot whaler, I think. It looks like an inflatable because it has big round tubes. However, it's solid aluminum, and it has a wakeboard tower on it, and they run enough motor that they can actually pull a skier, which is very cool. And it works as a 6-person dive boat. And they have it on a cradle on the deck when they're on passage. And I think Maggie is the coolest dinghy out there, honestly. I don't know what the model is. I think I wrote down 13-foot whaler because, like, I kind of have an affinity to the Boston whaler, which is, the unsinkable fiberglass boat. If I had a boat big enough to fit a 17-foot Montauk, that's the dinghy that I would have.
A Montauk?
It's a model of Boston whaler.
It's a whaler?
Oh, man, it's so cool. And those things will...
How big does your boat have to be to have a 17-foot Montauk?
SV Seeker could hold it.
How big is SV Seeker?
I don't know.
Like
Expedition
54?
Drench could hold it. No, that's like an 80-foot boat.
Oh.
Yeah, they're huge.
So we're never going to have a 17-foot whaler?
Basically never.
Well, maybe we will.
Maybe we will.
If you're, like, captaining cruising.
There's some
ships.
cool boats for sale right now on Yacht Trader. I saw some really cool 70-foot yachts for less than $1 million lately. You want to partner on a boat? Let's go, baby. So anyway, our dinghy, like I said, is 10.5 feet. It's PVC. It has an aluminum floor with an inflatable keel. It rolls up to 4 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot by 1 foot. And that is small enough for us to strap on deck with the motor and go wherever.
Which is what we're going to do this weekend when we go to Sail GP, right?
Totally. Our boat is fitted with an electric motor for getting in and out of the harbor, which is perfect.
It's amazing.
We have like a 60-pound thrust, 70-pound thrust, 24-volt trolling motor that we put down in the engine compartment on our 1963 Pearson Ariel. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these boats. They have a rear locker that you drop the outboard motor into. Basically, if you leave the locker closed and run the motor, it will choke on its own exhaust because the ventilation was never designed properly. This is a common problem with any of these older boats that have a locker for the outboard motor. The previous owner, to solve that problem, had outfitted it with electric, and so we have 2 big AGM batteries wired in 24 volt, 200 amp hours, and they run the motor for hours. You know, we tested it the other day in calm conditions. Like, we were able to run the electric motor for like 10 miles or something like that to push our 5,000 pound boat across the San Francisco Bay, and we did not run out of power. We pushed it to the limit. We were reading 10% capacity left in our batteries when we got back to the dock, but we didn't run out of power. And we had the 4-stroke, 4-horsepower Yamaha down in the cabin sole just in case we needed it, which is what we're using for our dinghy motor, which I think is really cool about our boat, that we're able to use the dinghy motor as the motor for the vessel, right? Or in our case, we're using it as a backup motor for the vessel and a primary motor for the dinghy.
I always heard big boat, big problems. So having small boat, small dinghy, we have...
It's a medium-sized dinghy.
Medium-sized dinghy, medium-sized boat, small-sized boat.
We still have large problems, though. It's all good, though. I mean, basically, you know...
Starting small and working our way up is the way to go.
If you're going to go buy a dinghy after you listen to this podcast, buy the biggest dinghy you can. Power it with the highest horsepower motor you can. And make any excuse that you have to make that bigger. Like, buy the biggest dinghy you can, because no one
for your cruising vessel.
regretted buying... Like, no one ever regretted buying a dinghy that was too big. But they definitely regretted buying one that was too small. And the same with your cruising vessel. The same with your weekend sailor. You know, buy the biggest boat that
you can handle.
You can handle and afford.
And afford.
Most importantly, afford.
And also handle, which they're kind of the same thing.
They are. But the thing is that once you get out there, you're going to learn what you need to know. Surround yourself with boaters and you will be a boater. Like, go walk the docks, get on bigger boats, and you know you're gonna get there. You're gonna learn what you need to know. Like, don't be afraid of the unknown. Like, don't be afraid of what you don't know, and don't let that stop you from your dreams.
Go get them, baby. We've
only owned our boat for 6 months and we're already shopping for a bigger one.
Yeah. I mean,
we bought a 26-foot classic vessel because
we wanted a boat.
Right, and we wanted the lowest slip fees we could handle. We wanted the lowest amount of boat that we can handle.
But we ended up getting what got us in the game, basically.
Yeah.
And so now we're in the game.
We bought the biggest boat we could afford to buy at that moment in time.
Exactly.
And we're pretty happy with that.
We're super stoked with it.
We can't wait to buy a bigger one, honestly.
honestly.
And, I can't wait to sell my small boat to someone who will appreciate the work that I've put into it,
And we'll continue putting into it.
That's the idea is you buy something, you use it every weekend, you make it better, and you move on.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's what we are doing.
So we love our sweet little Tern for the time being, and we're going to get some good use out of her.
Hell yeah.
And then, we're already looking towards moving on. So you saw like a 32-foot Pearson, what's it called?
Vagabond.
Vagabond?
Right?
Vanguard.
Well, we are a couple vagabonds, but anyway, the Vanguard is a cool boat. It's slightly larger than ours. It has about 4 feet longer waterline, and then it was 32 feet.
It's 32 feet. It's made like in the same era.
Yeah, almost the same year.
Yeah, 62 to 67.
Different designer, however, you can see the influence of Alberg in it. It's very similar to the Triton or the Alberg 30. It's slightly longer.
So we saw one.
Yeah, anyway, there's one down in Mexico that I'm looking at, and, Lauren said I could go get it if I got the balls.
If you think you can get it back up here.
Yeah. I don't know, babe. Maybe I'll just disappear down to Mexico.
Mm-hmm. I'm so sure.
So anyway, Lauren, tell us about some martini tips.
So we have dinghy rips and martini tips. Anything else you want to say about dinghies?
I mean,
they're
awesome.
We named our dinghy Ding Ding.
Ding Ding.
Ding Ding. It's cute.
It's cute and sweet, just like
cute.
Our little Ellie dog.
Yeah, and we may keep this dinghy for a while, but we'll see. It just depends. We might get something bigger. If we can get to that next larger vessel, we might be getting a bigger dinghy.
Well, I think it's fine. Like, our dinghy's fine for what we have. Like, the biggest thing was, like, putting it in the slip with our current boat. And, like...
That was the biggest thing.
I mean,
and also, like you said, what can you roll up and take on board with you?
We already have a 26.5-foot boat inside of a 25-foot slip. So we can only overhang the back so far and tuck the dinghy. Like, we have it tied alongside in our bow, and it fills our half of the slip to the maximum.
Fits real nice.
Yeah. So we're trying not to break the rules of the marina. We are trying not to lift that thing up on deck every single time we go to the boat,
which is on the weekends.
Every weekend so far, we've been crushing it. We haven't missed
warriors.
a weekend in months.
Until this weekend. But you're going down there tomorrow.
I'm going down there tomorrow.
To prep for the SailGP.
Yeah, I got to do a little bit of boat work. We bought a new bilge pump. We bought some electrical gear that I'm going to put in. And basically, like, I'm rewiring the boat, like, one circuit at a time right now. So the idea is that once I'm done, everything will be labeled, easy to troubleshoot, up to code, and ready for the next owner, because this is going to be a long project.
He just can't help himself.
I have to tinker, which you will too if you buy a yacht.
A yacht.
Yes.
So martini tips.
Yeah, tell me about martinis, babe, because I didn't know anything about martinis until you made me one the other day, honestly. Like, I mean, I knew James Bond drank them.
We decided to do martini tips. I don't quite know why, but...
Because we had a bunch of olive juice, and I love gin.
Olive juice is why we decided we were going to do martinis. So, because we had so much olive juice on hand, and Tim loves gin, we decided to look into whether Tim might like martinis. And it turns out that he does. So, we have classic martini recipe right off the bat, which is going to be 4 parts gin to 1 part vermouth, meaning, like, if you cut it in half, that's 2 ounces gin to a ½ ounce vermouth.
What kind of vermouth?
Not sweet vermouth.
Obviously.
It has to be dry vermouth if you're going to use the vermouth. So traditionally, the martini is going to be stirred, not shaken, and served up, which means without ice, and with either a single olive or a lemon twist. So that's your classic martini. If you substitute the olive or the lemon twist for an onion, then you have what's called a Gibson. Or a Gibson martini.
Interesting.
So traditional martini has olive or lemon twist.
What about a shallot? Can you put a shallot in it?
Like a cocktail onion.
Okay.
Do you know? It's like a little pearl onion.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like a green, like the bottom of a green onion.
So if you go to a restaurant,
Like the bottom of scallion,
and you ask for a classic martini, then you should get 4 parts gin, not vodka, 1 part vermouth, meaning 2 ounces gin to ½ ounce vermouth.
So you have to specify the vodka martini?
If you go to a restaurant like these days and you say like, "Can I have a martini?" then generally the bartender is going to ask, "Do you want vodka or gin martini?" And that's because some people don't know that a classic martini is a gin drink because it's evolved
I didn't know that.
over the course of time to where
I thought it was
people
vodka.
will drink a vodka martini. It's a variation of a classic martini in that it's an evolution of the cocktail, which happens with a lot of the classic cocktails. The martini is one of the
It's an early cocktail.
It is a classic cocktail, and so I think it's fitting that if we're going to be talking about cocktails on our podcast, which we're starting with the martini. And
it's a good foundation.
It's a good foundation to start from. You have 2 classics. Well, you have a classic spirit being gin, another classic spirit being vodka, and the variations that you can make from those. So when you're talking about variations of martinis, you have the dirty martini, which is going to add a splash of olive juice to the traditional recipe. The dry martini uses a little bit more gin and a little bit less vermouth. So what a lot of people will do is just do a little vermouth swirl in the glass and then do the gin. So you just get like the hint of the vermouth. Mm-hmm. You have the 50-50 martini, which has equal parts gin and dry vermouth, so much more heavier on the vermouth. The perfect martini combines gin with equal parts dry and sweet vermouth. So that's something a little bit different. The vodka martini swapping gin for vodka. And then the Vesper martini or the James Bond martini, also known as the 007 martini, is both gin and vodka with Lillet Blanc, which is a French aperitif in place of the vermouth. So that's something.
What's the aperitif?
What's an aperitif?
Yeah, like
so
how
we talked about an aperitif.
Like how does it taste versus vermouth?
Well, vermouth actually is an aperitif. A martini is an aperitif. So an aperitif just means basically like a pre-dinner
cocktail
or spirit.
Yeah.
Spirit or cocktail.
So you want to drink it on an empty stomach. That way you feel it.
So Lillet Blanc is a French aperitif. And the 007 martini with gin, vodka, and Lillet Blanc is something, it's a variation on the obviously traditional martini. So
we probably can't afford Lillet Blanc.
We can afford whatever we want. Everything is about choices. When we made martinis a couple of weeks ago, we went to the liquor store. First thing we did was shop for vermouth, and I saw a bottle of sweet vermouth, which I recognized that I liked from the bar, and we got the sweet vermouth, which was a mistake.
This was actually a blessing in disguise, though, because we found out that my perfect martini contains no vermouth at all.
Yep, and we don't even have to stock dry vermouth in our liquor cabinet, which is a thumbs up.
Yeah, because
bonus.
We're cheap.
Well, also because space counts when you're talking about a boat bar. And we're working on curating our perfect boat bar. And we have realized that for the time being, we don't really see the need for dry vermouth. But we do have a bottle of the sweet vermouth unopened on the ready, which we'll get to down the road.
Yeah, we'll definitely let you guys know what kind of cocktails we make with that.
We will.
So let's talk about the gin.
So the
because
gin.
I'm a gin connoisseur. I love my gin. My go-to drink is a gin and tonic with like a couple squeezes of lime. I like it heavy on the lime. And I tend to enjoy a very like botanical gin. You know, St. George here in San Francisco.
Is that where they are?
Yeah.
San Francisco?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's a really nice
And you know,
spirit line.
one of the flavors that most people associate with gin is like juniper and, you know, kind of like a piney flavor. You know, I really do like a very like heavy or just
botanical herbaceous.
Gin. Yes, exactly. However, I can also appreciate like a very smooth kind of dry gin.
Which is what we went for.
Aviation.
Yep. So
Aviation is just it's very light, it's very thin, it's very like refreshing. It has hints of all that stuff, botanical stuff we're talking about. However, it's very smooth drinking. Like you could turn it up like a bottle of Stoli. Oh wait, we're not supposed to promote Stoli these days.
It comes with a
Tito's. I meant Tito's.
Picture of Ryan Reynolds on the.
Wait, what?
The Aviation.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, we're not promoting Ryan Reynolds on this podcast or anything, but.
But, hey, we're not complaining either. So Tim picked Aviation Gin for the martini cocktail that we were going to do.
Because the martini is typically poured with a less botanical gin than I typically like, which would be...
For like a gin and tonic.
You know, like Botanist or...
Hendricks.
Or... yeah, so Aviation is more on like the Beefeater level where it's just not... It's more smooth. Mm-hmm. It's not as like fragrant.
And you can definitely do a classic gin martini with any of those more botanical gins, and you may like actually the classic martini with the gin and the vermouth.
If you like more of a classic like botanical gin, Gray Whale is another local San Francisco. Try that one.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for a dirty martini, I feel personally that the umami of the olive juice is going to pair better with a less botanical gin, and one that's a little bit more on the neutral or the smoother side. So the Aviation worked perfectly well for the dirty martini that we came up with, that we're going to call Tern's Perfect Dirty Martini. So and
if your local store doesn't stock Aviation, we're fortunate that they have a Bevmo down in Emeryville, and the Aviation was like $25 for a fifth. But Beefeater would be another good selection that typically every store is going to have, no matter where you're at.
Yep. So we created Tern's Perfect Dirty Martini, which is great because it's only 2 ingredients. You just have your gin and your olive juice. And then for your garnish, you have your olives. So you only need 1 spirit in the liquor cabinet to be able to execute this cocktail. And you could definitely have this be a vodka martini or a gin martini. So it's going to be same recipe for vodka or gin in terms of the ratio that Tim decided was just to his liking. So
tell me about it. I'm getting thirsty.
We tried a couple of variations before we landed upon your preferred iteration, which is a 3-to-2 part gin to olive juice. So essentially 3 ounces gin, 2 ounces to olive juice. And that was right up Tim's alley. And
with 3 olive garnishes, because I feel like you need them. Like chewing on a little olive after your first couple sips, crunching down an olive in the middle of your cocktail, and then really like just washing it down with like the bitter olive. Like, I love olives, you know. Some people don't, but I am a big fan of olives. So I think that part of the whole experience was definitely
the garnish. Yeah, just like a Bloody Mary.
Along the way, it's a journey. You know
and for people that do like that dirty martini experience, the olives can be an integral part of that experience. So I totally agree, and I'm not knocking it. We're putting it as a cocktail in our cocktail book. Tern's Perfect Dirty Martini, 3 ounces gin, 2 ounces olive juice, 3 olives as the garnish, shaken, not stirred.
Yes, 3 ounces of gin, 2 ounces of olive juice, 3 olives as the garnish.
And shaky.
Shaky.
Yep, so not stirred. So when you shaky, instead of stirring the cocktail, you get much colder, and it's going to make the drink a lot cloudier, which if you're doing a dirty martini, it's going to be cloudy anyway because of the olive juice. If you're going to do a martini with olive juice, shaking is going to combine the ingredients more so than stirring. Whereas if you're doing a classic martini, which doesn't incorporate olive juice, it only incorporates the olive as a garnish, you stir and you have that completely transparent glass looking cocktail without any cloudiness from the shaking or ice shards
because the
floating.
shaking is going to break the ice up and make the drink a little more cloudy.
And also...
And then when you put the oily olives into the liquor, it's going to...
It's just
combine it more than it's not going to let the liquor float on top of the olive juice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're going for such a heavy concentration of the olive juice, shaking is good. And also it gives it that extra dilution that the broken down ice brings, which cuts the intensity of the gin a little bit more. And even though it's a super simple cocktail, gin, juice, and ice, it still ends up becoming something sophisticated.
Yeah, and you want a little bit of water after you've been sailing all day. You know, don't just go full dehydration status.
Exactly. Straight
to the
gin.
Of water with your gin.
The olive juice gives you that little bit of umami. The olives give you that little bit of nutrition.
And the ice takes care of your insides.
Hydration. Yeah. And then the ice brings you that little bit of hydration that you need. So that's our Tern's Perfect Dirty Martini in a nutshell.
I can't wait to have another one.
Yeah. So we are going to be talking about our cocktail strategy for the Sail GP race this weekend, which is...
Do you have a cocktail picked out for the Sail GP?
I'm going to do a little bit of research, I think. And we're kind of working on a little bit of cocktail compilation book. First recipe going to be that Tern's Perfect Dirty Martini. And we're going to take a lot of classic cocktails and practice variations, practice making them on the boat, see how they work for boat life, and sort of curate a list of recipes based on experience that we're able to try over the weekend. So I'd like to come up with something that we can name for the Sail GP. So I haven't made a decision yet, but we're definitely going to have a specialty cocktail for the weekend. Let's be real. Yeah.
Well, and typically I think sailboat racing has an affinity for champagne.
We may be going for a champagne cocktail this weekend.
I kind of want one. I'm thinking champagne and charcuterie is the motif for the evening.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Probably going to be the route that we're going to go. So back to the martini conversation. I do want to share a couple more things about sweet vermouth versus dry vermouth.
Okay.
So if you're going to use sweet, then you're actually moving into a spin-off cocktail that is called the Martinez. So the Martinez, some people think that the Martinez actually was originated as a cocktail before the martini. The martini is a separate category, the Martinez is actually a separate category of cocktail, all upon its own with spin-off cocktails of its own.
Does this have anything to do with the Martinez city in the Bay Area?
It does. Yeah. So the Martinez is named after Martinez in the Bay Area.
The town near Crockett, right?
The town near Crockett.
It's where the it's basically where the delta dumps into the bay, right? The San Joaquin River comes into the bay. So
the Martinez cocktail is going to be, let's call it 1.5 ounces gin, 1.5 ounces sweet vermouth, then a 1/4 ounce of maraschino liqueur.
Okay.
Which we don't have, but is going to sweet it up. Couple dashes of bitters, and then it gets garnished with a lemon or orange twist and served up. Also traditionally served stirred as opposed to shaken, but we would probably like it shaken just because that's how we like things.
Shake it up, baby.
Shake it up, baby. The Martinez may very well have predated the martini and originated in the Bay Area where we happen to be beginner novice sailors. So we're gonna have to have a
But
night to
not
try the
beginners,
Martinez.
novice drinkers.
We're not beginner drinkers. No,
Lauren
not
is
after
my-
all this time.
My bartender on retainer, and like if there's anyone I ever trust to make me a perfect cocktail for the occasion, it is this lady right here.
I have worked in cocktails professionally. Cocktails can be a cool part of making an occasion.
Yeah, like cocktails aren't about getting smashed. Like, you know, if you want to get smashed, go turn up a bottle of gin, you know, or vodka or whatever. But, you know, cocktails are about just adding a little bit of spice to your occasion, you know.
Absolutely. So we're not in favor of getting too turnt, although we may have been known to do that on more occasions than
I like
one.
to have a good time,
But-
you know. But yeah, like I said, it's like we're not talking about smashing Coors Lights here. We're talking about fixing yourself and your party a beverage to kick it up a notch, if you will.
Enjoy yourselves and from time to time commemorate an occasion. When you're talking about martinis, especially if you're making them our way, which calls for 3 ounces of booze in a pour, 1 is great, 2 is more than enough, and 3 is too much for an evening. Period.
Or a lunch.
Or a lunch. So
That's
that
why
whole
they
3
call it
martini lunch thing,
Yeah.
there's
a reason it has a name.
Yep. And
'Cause
so
we can tell when you've had 3 of them.
So if you're experimenting with martinis, just know your own limits. And if you are the bartender on board that's making martinis for people, 3 is too much. So you got to know when to cut the
Don't
cord.
be afraid to cut people off.
Don't be afraid to cut people
Honestly,
off, even if
like-
they're your friends. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Steer them in a different direction. And if you're the one that's in control of the spirits on board, then
Throw some more water in there. They'll never notice if they've already had 2.
you know, it's your bar, so you can help control the vibe on your boat, you know, or at your party. So just a little pro tip there. Don't skimp on quality.
Never on anything. We're not just talking about liquor here.
Yep.
Yeah, don't skimp on quality. Buy good sailboat parts.
Yep. Buy good dinghies.
Yep.
And the quality of your experience will be greatly determined by the quality of spirit or ingredients.
Or personality of your bartender.
Yeah, that too.
Well, I'm getting thirsty. I think this podcast is over.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, guys. We will bring you more cocktail tips and probably even get a few dinghy rips in here and there.
And now a word from our sponsor,
Is that Dirtbag Yachtsman?
Dirtbag Yachtsman.
This podcast was brought to you by Dirtbag Yachtsman, babe.
If you want to be sponsored by,
Dirtbag Yachtsman.
then all you have to do is email
That
sailing couple at
gmail.com.
gmail.com. And you can be sponsored by Dirtbag Yachtsman. Hit us up for details.
Yeah, let us know.
It's on the down low
in the
right
comments.
And we'll be talking to you guys for the Sail GP this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, we're going to do a podcast from the water. Probably not live because we're just not that techie.
Yeah. we're
But
not-
we will record something and we will release it next week. And we're really excited to see the F-50s fly.
we can't wait.
If you guys don't know about these boats, like go check them out. There's 7 teams. This is the grand final of the season on Sunday. And holy shit, these things go fast.
It's going to
And-
be epic.
Oh
So
my God, I cannot wait. The forecast is for like 10 knots. We just had a front move through. The ocean should be pretty flat. They do like highway speeds in these, and 6-person teams fly these foiling catamarans. Holy shit, this is the pinnacle of sailboat racing right now. I mean, the only thing I would
and we're
rather
going to have
see.
front row seats from our own cockpit.
I wish I could be in St. Barth's to see the J class right now, but I'm really glad I'm in San Francisco to see these F-50s.
Woo!
Baby, baby.
Baby, baby.
All right, thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you later. Hopefully, we'll see you in Anchorage somewhere. And if you're in Berkeley, come see us.
Come on down.
That sailing couple.